What's going on, everybody? So, I'm coming back again with another video, and I was actually thinking about R. Kelly's bail appeal, and I found myself asking, was his bail appeal a mistake? And then you look at the fact that not only did he appeal in New York, but then he followed through with several other motions for bail in Chicago. And I'm asking myself, was it a mistake? Was his appeal for bail and the repeated attempts of bail in Chicago a mistake? And some people will probably just think I'm being negative, and I always try to prevent from being negative, but I think sometimes you really have to be true to yourself, and you have to, look at some of the things that you're doing, because whether you win or lose, or whether you prevail, or you succeed or not, a lot of times you can always get something out of it, right? Just because you have a temporary defeat or momentary loss, it's only temporary, and it's only a momentary loss if you choose to get what is called the seed of equivalent benefit. Every failure, every defeat in this world, so I'm told, and I believe it, every failure, every defeat has a benefit. And if you glean that benefit, then you've basically transmuted. You're basically turning lead into gold, right? A little alchemy for you there, right? So you're observing failures gives you the opportunity to turn lead into gold. And that's if you guys think his appeals were actually failures. I'll say this, and you know what? Before I go too deep, let me just go ahead and read the order in Chicago. And this order was given, sometime back. I think it was like on the 19th or something like that, or a couple of days ago. It's old. It's not something new. Let me see if I can just scroll down and see a date on this. Yeah, so it was given a couple of days ago. Today is October 22nd. This was given on the 19th. So let's go ahead and read this. So this is in the United States District Court for the Northern District of Illinois' Eastern Division, United States of America, who is the plaintiff, the prosecutors, versus Robert Sylvester Kelly, right? And then also in this case is Daryl McDavid and Milton Brown, or June Brown, right? So order. For the reasons stated herein, the court denies defendant Robert Sylvester Kelly's motion to reconsider bail, and then it goes, and motion for evidentiary hearing. And then it goes, a motion to reconsider bail. Mr. Kelly moves this court to reconsider his bail determination for the third time, right? So this is one of the things I'm talking about, and this is the point I'm going to get to at the end. This is the third time in Chicago, but as you guys know, there's been multiple times in New York as well, right? So the Bail Reform Act permits a district court to order pretrial detention if it concludes that no condition or combination of conditions will reasonably assure the appearance of the person as required and the safety of any other person and the community. 18 U.S.C. 3142 E1. Everyone knows what that is. I have multiple videos covering this topic. And then it goes on to say, in making this determination, the court must consider the following factors. 1, the nature and circumstances of the offense charged. 2, the weight of the evidence against the defendant. 3, the history and the characteristics of the person. And 4, the nature and seriousness of the danger to any person or the community that would be posed by the defense release, 3142G. And again, 3142G is the bail statute, is part of the bail statute. Whereas here, a defendant is charged with qualifying crimes involving a minor, there is a rebuttal presumption of pretrial detention. And then it goes on, the defendant bears a limited burden of production to present evidence that he will not flee or endanger the community if released. United States versus Porter. Even if the defendant rebuts it, the presumption remains in the case as an evidentiary finding militating. I don't even know what that word means. I guess that I think they tried to type mitigating, right? So the presumption remains in the case of as an evidentiary finding militating against his release, untimely, right? Let me just read that again because it's a militating word really threw me off. Actually, let me see if I can switch. Let me see if I can get the definition of militating real fast. Be right back. All right, so militate, a fact or circumstance being a powerful or conclusive factor in preventing. Interesting word. Never seen that word before in my life. You learn something new every day. Anyway, let's just continue on. So, yeah, let's just go ahead and read this again. Even if the defendant rebuts it, the presumption remains in the case as an evidentiary finding militating against his release. Ultimately, the government retains the burden of persuasion by clear and convincing evidence that the defendant is dangerous and preponderance of evidence that the defendant is a flight risk, right? So I interpret this to mean that R. Kelly has a small job to do when convincing the court that he should be released, and the government has a big job where they have to really put a lot of effort into proving by the preponderance of evidence that he should be locked up and that until the trial is had and until there's a decision, right? So Mr. Kelly argues that the court incorrectly applied the Bail Reform Act and the facts do not warrant his pretrial detention. And previously denying Mr. Kelly's bail, the court concluded that there is no condition or combination of conditions that would reasonably assure Mr. Kelly's appearance and safety of the community. In doing so, the court considers the factors set forth in 18 U.S.C. 3142G, we just read those, as applied to Mr. Kelly. Ultimately, it found that the weight of the factors favored detention. Consistent with the Eastern District of New York findings in this thrice denying Mr. Kelly's, so they talk about New York, and the Second Circuit's affirmance of the denial, the court found that Mr. Kelly possesses a significant flight risk and a danger to the community. Bank records produced since then show that Mr. Kelly has the means to flee, considering the multiple charges and the severe penalties at stake. Mr. Kelly also has the motive to flee. The risk of witness tampering and obstruction of justice are high, particularly as they relate to the missing videos mentioned in the superseding indictment and the grand jury's finding that the witnesses were paid and threatened to charge testimony or not to appear. Particularly as they relate to the missing videos mentioned in the superseding indictment and the grand jury's finding that the witnesses were paid and threatened to change testimony or not to appear. For these reasons, the court found that the electronic monitoring and home confinement conditions would be sufficient. For these reasons, the court found that the electronic monitoring and home confinement conditions would be insufficient.
At Aspen Dental, smile for zero money down with zero worries. Plus pay zero interest if paid in full within.
Mr. Kelly has not demonstrated a change in circumstances that would alter the court's previous conclusion that pretrial detention is necessary. Further, even if the court were inclined to grant the motion, Mr. Kelly remains subject to a pretrial detention order from the Eastern District of New York that was recently affirmed by the Second Circuit Court of Appeals. Mr. Kelly's pretrial detention is not indefinite. Indeed, Mr. Kelly and Mr. Brown recently agreed to the governor's proposal to set a trial date and the next status conference on December 16th. So December 16th, we should have trial dates. While McDavid objected alone, Mr. Kelly will go to trial as soon as it is safe and practicable. Until then, he will remain in detention. Then it goes on to talk about the evidentiary hearing. Mr. Kelly also moves for either immediate release or an evidentiary hearing to investigate a recent incident with a former fellow inmate at the Metropolitan Correction Center. Kelly asserts that the inmate physically assaulted him and that MCC personnel, among other things, failed to intervene in a timely manner. Mr. Kelly does not cite nor can the court find any cases to support his contentions. While the incident is concerning, it does not warrant immediate release, nor is it material to the court's detention determination under the Bail Reform Act. This single isolated incident does not suggest that the Bureau of Prisons is incapable of safely housing Mr. Kelly. The inmate involved in the incident with Mr. Kelly has since been transferred to a different facility. In any event, release from custody is not the appropriate remedy for such a wrong. If Mr. Kelly wishes to challenge the conditions of his confinement or the MCC's ability to protect him, he can bring those claims in a separate civil action following proper exhaustion of remedies. Accordingly, the court denies Mr. Kelly's motion to reconsider bail and the motion for evidentiary hearing. So let me go ahead and get into this. So now, as you just heard me read, he was already denied bail 3 times in New York, and then he was also denied bail several times in Chicago. And again, I'm not trying to be negative. Definitely not trying to be negative. I don't want y'all to come and start beating me up and say, oh, you're being too negative. Say something positive. Get some positive videos. What you need to understand that sometimes you have to, and if you're not doing this in your life personally, you're not living your life right. Sometimes life requires us to take inventory. Sometimes we have to take a minute to think about the things we've done and what we can get out of the things we've done. Even though that there appears to be a failure on surface, we sometimes have to go back and we have to look and see if that failure came with a benefit. And 90%, I'm just going to say, I believe 99% of all failures come with a benefit. And in my opinion, the bail hearings are over. There's no more. The bail hearings were over way before they even had the appeal. That's my own personal opinion. And I say that for several reasons.